Breaking right now, we've got the new video of President Trump's meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Let's watch.
自動車を米国で作るということ、これは非常に良いビジネスになると思います。多くの国々からこういった投資がありますけれども、これはひとえに米国の税制があるからだと思います。ですので、こういった業務というものはこれからもどんどん進んでいくことを期待します。トヨタ氏ですけれども、私は彼に会ったこともありますし、彼は私の友人でもあります。ぜひとも彼によろしくお伝えしていただければと思います。また、貿易赤字に関してなんですけれども、今、日米の間で100億ドルほどの貿易赤字があります。これは日本が素晴らしい交渉力を持っているからだと思うんですけれども、これを均衡に戻す必要があると思いまして、これは各国とも私は常に言っていることですけれども、貿易をその均衡に戻す、これが一つの私の策でもあります。
To what extent will you discuss North Korea today, sir?
That'll always be a topic, especially with Japan. We will be discussing North Korea and many other things. We'll be spending pretty much the day, but that's always a topic.
Mr. President, have you changed your mind about the sale of U.S. steel?
No, I think we're going to be discussing that today. No, I haven't, and I hear we'll have some pretty good information on that. You might want to go, please.
Are tariffs an option, Mr. President?
Have you?
Is it?
Okay.
Mr. President, are tariffs an option if the deficit doesn't get to equilibrium or to equality?
Yes, they are.
Mr. President, can you discuss what your plan is for reciprocal trade? Are you signing an EO on that today?
I'll be announcing that next week, reciprocal trade, so that we're treated evenly with other countries. We don't want any more or any less. So I'll be announcing that next week. And many other things having to do not even with trade, but other things. But I'll be talking about reciprocal trade sometime next week. We'll have a news conference and we'll lay it out. Pretty simple.
Every single country?
It affects everybody, yeah. Reciprocal, yeah. We'll be talking about that next week.
出社にちょっと伺いたいんですけれども、今関税を課すっていう話になってるんですけど、関税が課されることについてはどのように考えていらっしゃいますか？
お互いにそれが利益になるようにということが重要なことだと思っております。合衆国の発展、そして日本国の発展、そのために有益な制度となることを期待をしておりまして、具体的なことについて。
So this is the second world leader that President Trump is meeting with. He had Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, there over the recent days. But this is obviously a very important ally, and we're told that Prime Minister Ishiba has spent a lot of time preparing for this meeting. The issue of U.S. steel just came up. Will there be any trade restrictions on Japan is one of the issues that people will be watching very closely in this. Also, Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister who was assassinated after he left office, was a close friend of President Trump's. And so this new prime minister is looking to create that warm relationship with his ally, President Trump here in the United States. So this is going to be an interesting back and forth. Let's listen.
I think it'll be very easy for Japan. We have a fantastic relationship. I don't think we'll have any problem whatsoever. They want fairness also.
それはうまく進むと思います。日本は素晴らしいパートナーですし、彼らもことがスムーズに進むことを期待していると思います。これは双方にとってです。
Mr. President, do you have a reaction to the new Time magazine cover that has Elon Musk sitting behind your Resolute desk?
タイムマガジンにイーロン・マスクが大統領の机の後ろで座っている写真がありますけれども、それに関するコメントは何かありますか？
Is Time magazine still in business? I didn't even know that.
まだタイムマガジンは廃刊じゃないんですか？
Elon is doing a great job. He's finding tremendous fraud and corruption and waste. You see it with the USAID, but you're going to see it even more so with other agencies and other parts of government. He's got a staff that's fantastic. He's wanted to be able to do this for a long time, and everybody else knew it was existent, but I think never so much when you look at USAID. That's a That's a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. Very little being put to good use. Every single line that I look at in terms of events and transactions is either corrupt or ridiculous. And we're going to be doing that throughout government. And I think we're going to be very close to balancing budgets for the first time in many years. I think we're going to be very close to, in addition to monies coming in from tariffs, et cetera, but he's doing a very good job. I'm very happy with it.
Will you put Elon Musk up on the podium for us to ask him some questions, Mr. President, at any point? Will you put Elon Musk up on the podium for us to ask him some questions?
Oh, sure, he'll be. He's not shy. Elon's not shy.
Any further deliberations on Gaza, sir? The timetable for a takeover?
No deliberations. It's been very well received, where basically the United States would view it as a real estate transaction, where we'll be an investor in that part of the world, and no rush to do anything. We wouldn't need anybody there. It would be supplied and given to us by Israel. They'll watch it in terms of security. We're not talking about boots on the ground or anything, but I think the fact that we're there, that we have an investment there, I think would go a long way to creating peace. We don't want to see everybody move back and then move out in 10 years. This has been going on for 50 years, much more than that. We just want to see stability. That would be having us have that particular piece in that particular location, I think would show great stability and would lead to great stability in the area for very little money, very little price, and we wouldn't need soldiers at all. That will be taken care of by others. And the investments are taken care of by others also. So for no investment, I mean virtually no investment whatsoever, it would bring stability to the area, and others can invest in it later on. But we're in no rush on it. There's absolutely no rush.
President Trump, do you believe DeepSeek is a national security threat, and how do you plan to collaborate on AI initiatives?
On where?
DeepSeek, do you believe it's a national security threat?
No, I think it's happening. I mean, it's a technology that's happening. It's actually, I think we're going to benefit if it's correct what's going on now, that it'll be a lot less expensive. The AI we're talking about will be a lot less expensive than people originally thought. That's a good thing. I view that as a very good development, not a bad development.
Mr. President, on autos specifically, in your first term, you tried to tariff autos. Is that on the table still? Are you trying to do that in your second administration?
Auto tariff?
Auto tariff?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's on the table. That's always on the table. It's a very big deal. Because we are, we have cases where we don't supply autos and other countries do, and we have to equalize it. We have to stabilize it and equalize it.
Will you have Vice President Vance meet with President Zelenskyy next week while he's in Europe?
I will probably be meeting with President Zelenskyy next week, and I will probably be talking to President Putin. I'd like to see that war end for one primary reason. They're killing so many people. You're losing millions of people on a battlefield. In this case, mostly the battlefield. You have 800,000 or 900,000 Russian soldiers are dead and very badly wounded, and the same thing with Ukraine. You have probably 700,000 with Ukraine. The numbers they gave are a little bit lower than that, but I believe those numbers aren't correct. I'd like to see it end just on a human basis. It's terrible what's going on. They have open fields with no protection. The only thing a bullet can hit is a human body, and the human body dies as soon as it gets hit. Now, I'd like to see that end. It's a ridiculous war. It would have never started if I were president. That war would have never started. Putin would not have started that war if I were president. And by the way, you wouldn't have had October 7th if I was president either. That mess would not have started. But no, I would very much like to help out. One of the things we're looking at with President Zelenskyy is having the security of their assets. They have assets underground, rare earth and other things, but primarily rare earth. And we want to have security. Really, we want security because, as you know, Europe is putting up much less money than us. NATO, Europe, call it whatever you want. And we're at probably 300 billion plus, and they're at probably, the real number is 100 billion. That's a lot of money, but it's 200 billion less than us, and there's an ocean in between. And they need it more than us. So we're asking them to equalize and get even. But we're also asking President Zelenskyy for the security of, we're putting all this money up, and we're saying, where does it stop? And yet, we want to see it out to an end. We want to see it end. But we are going to be asking for the security, and we've already told him, of an equal amount of something where our money, I mean, the American taxpayers in for $300 billion. Biden never negotiated. He never told Europe to put in more money. And it got out of hand, just like NATO. NATO, we were paying almost 100% of NATO. When I first came in, everybody was taking advantage of the good old United States, but not anymore. So what, and now, if you speak to the Secretary General of NATO, who was very nice when he was here 2 weeks ago, he said what Trump did was amazing. He got everybody to pay. And to do that, you have to ask, and Biden never asked. So we're in for probably close to $200 billion more than Europe, and yet obviously it affects Europe much more than us. So we would like them to stay, to equalize. They have to go more. And from our standpoint, we do want security and all this money that we're putting up.
And you're speaking with him next week, sir? Is that what you said?
You're going to speak.
He may meet next week, yeah. Whenever he'd like. I'm here. I'm here. Could be Washington. Well, I'm not going there.
Are you planning to meet with President Putin, or are you just planning a phone call?
It could be. We've always had a good relationship. President Putin and I have always had a good relationship. That's why it's so sad that it happened. This would have never happened if I were president. It's so sad to see it happen. So many dead people. By the way, so many cities are demolished. They're like, you talk about Gaza? Well, take a look at Ukraine. So many of those cities are demolition sites. Demolished. So sad. Should have never happened. All those beautiful golden domes, but much more importantly, all those beautiful people are dead. And it should have never happened. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you, Brad. Let's go, guys. Come on, guys. Hey, let's go. Thank you, guys. Let's exit.
Oval Office discussion as President Trump has welcomed the Prime Minister of Japan, Ishiba, to the White House, and they're going to be discussing trade issues for sure, but you saw that the conversation, when the press started asking questions, quickly went to Gaza and Ukraine. President Trump saying that really it would be an economic effort in Gaza to see it rebuilt, and that others would take the economic responsibility. He said we won't need any soldiers on the ground in the process of trying to oversee a rebuild in Gaza, which certainly needs to happen. Griff, your reaction to what you heard in there?
Well, I heard news. Every time he has a photo op, there's news made, and he takes questions on everything. What's fascinating to me, Martha, was I was in Mar-a-Lago December 16th when the SoftBank CEO, Japanese SoftBank CEO, Masayoshi Son, came and pledged $100 billion in U.S. investment, particularly in AI. And so while the Gaza and Elon getting up to the podium, which as a reporter I'm looking forward to ask him questions, there's a lot of news made there. The image there of trying to forge a relationship with this new Japanese prime minister, because, of course, as you pointed out, he had such a close relationship with Abe. This Ishiba was just elected in October, so it's a new relationship. But then you look at the trade, $100 billion from SoftBank, who knows what else is on the table. We had a $69 billion trade deficit last year with Japan. We know Trump cares about trade deficits, so I think there was a lot happening there. Also notable, you had Vice President Vance and Secretary Hegseth sitting on the couch next to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheryl, there was a purchase. Abe purchased 105 F-35s from the United States. We know that President Trump likes to see investment in U.S. defense from our allies. Thoughts on that or the trade issue, which I saw you also watching really closely?
Well, there was some news there also on U.S. steel and Nippon Steel, because you heard the president reiterate that he's still against the deal. Remember, the CEO of U.S. Steel was at the White House yesterday, and you've got the Japanese prime minister there right now, and the big push is to figure out a way to get that deal to go through. That's a $14.9 billion deal. So what I heard was, because the stock
had been acquisition of U.S. Steel by
Nippon Steel, which is the Japanese company, but And so the stock had been moving higher up until that moment during this news conference because traders are believing, and there's also a couple of news reports out there that Trump is considering saying yes. But I'm glad you brought up the fighter jet issue, because what I have a feeling is what the Japanese are trying to do right now is, okay, we'll buy more military equipment. We'll talk about the trade deficit, but how can we figure out how to make this transaction go through? U.S. still wants it. Nippon still wants it. There's a lawsuit over it that's in play right now because of the rejection by the Trump administration. So there's a lot of money on the line right now there, Martha.
Emily, also a lot of discussion about Ukraine, possible meetings between J.D. Vance was brought up, and then President Trump said that he expects also to speak to Zelenskyy this week.
Yeah, this week. If I may just add some color to the issue with Japan, I want to point out this, that Japan has been the largest foreign investor in the United States in the past 5 years. And it was interesting to me coming into this meeting how seriously the prime minister took the meeting with Trump. In fact, he said he took every preparation possible. He even met with Shinzo Abe's widow in terms of sort of preparing for this, and said his highest priority was, as you mentioned earlier, that personal relationship. I note that of multinational companies, Japan is the highest employer of Americans in 10 states and the second largest employer in 6. So we have a phenomenal economic relationship with Japan that I think doesn't get highlighted often. And top of the list, by the way, as well, was the security issues with North Korea and Japan, and also on our end, the semiconductors and AI. So it's interesting. You have these two allies coming together. I think it's really emblematic that the first Asiatic leader we have on our soil in the second administration is the Japanese prime minister, and how important that relationship is economically moving forward.
Can I just add, she mentioned he met with Abe's widow. He also met with SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son and wanted to find out what it would be like. And at that meeting back in December, he pledged $100 billion. And Trump, in real time, in front of all the press, said, "You want to double it, right?"
Yeah, how about more?
And then he brought him up to the microphone. He's like, "We'll try." So clearly,
no promises.
Ishiba wanted to know what's it going to be like dealing with them. And I assume that he was told he's a deal maker. Be ready.
One of the most fascinating things about this is China, obviously. Right. So the relationship with Japan, so important with our relationship with China. But, you know, you see President Trump trying to increase our footprint around the world, Greenland, Panama, places that stymie China in terms of their efforts to make these expansionist moves as well.
Well, this meeting was diplomatic strategy at its finest. I mean, we've already talked about how Japan is one of the biggest investors in the U.S. market, but it's bigger than that. It's also, our alliance with them is huge when it comes to the AI industry and the tech innovation, which we've already touched on as well. But you saw Secretary Hegseth there for a reason. Because of the nuclear ambitions of China, North Korea, we have to maintain these alliances, and we have to get a stronghold in the region, which is why President Trump has also been looking at Greenland, because we are seeing China continue to grow and continue to get a strong footprint when it comes to military and the threat. And so all of this is all interconnected. And I see President Trump is doing this. He's not just focusing on one thing. He's looking at things on a big scale. And what can we do to position the United States to keep the United States as strong as we are on the world stage?
This is three-level chess. It's fascinating to watch on a daily basis. So